Let's not play around and pretend that driving is not incredibly dangerous. And whether or not we typically view it this way, when we drive each and every day, we are in a sense taking our lives into our own hands and the hands of the other drivers on the road. That's why it's so important to make sure that you are a safe driver. And how can you make sure that you're doing so? Well, here's 5 very, very terrible habits that if you do, might show that you're not as good of a driver as you might have expected. Number 1 is using your phone while driving. And I'm sure there's 2 responses to this, which are either, oh brother, that's so cliche, or of course, I'm not using my phone, duh, that seems obvious. And although most of you who are thinking that probably aren't literally texting while driving or something like that, which is, in my opinion, completely unacceptable, there might be other small things that you're doing on your phone that probably almost all of us are guilty of that are something that we should probably kick because they can still be incredibly dangerous. When you're traveling at 60 miles per hour, 1 second covers about the length of a football field if I'm not mistaken, which I might be mistaken. I think that's the correct statistic. If I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below, but regardless, when doing regular highway speeds, you're covering a lot of distance very quickly, and subtle glances down to your phone, whether it's in your hand or even on a phone mount, something looking away for a couple seconds to change a song or something like that, or to open your navigation app or something like that, can be the difference, no hyperbole, no joke, between life or death in certain situations for either you or other people on the road. It is very important that you always have your focus on the road at all times. Like I said, this is something that probably a lot of us are guilty of. I certainly know that I am, and this is a habit that I am constantly trying to kick. I don't text while driving or something ridiculous like that, especially because that's made a lot more annoying when driving stick and something like that, which is a good deterrent in the first place. But although, like I said, I'm not spending loads of time on my phone while driving, those small glances here and there can still add up to a lot of time and can still be incredibly dangerous. So if you're traveling somewhere where you don't need navigation or something like that you would use your phone for, the best idea might just be to keep your phone in your pocket at all times while driving. The number 2 habit that may show that you're not as safe of a driver as you expected is quite interesting, I would have to say, because of course we all know that taking the right of way while driving, such as like at a 4-way stop or whatever it may be, is incredibly dangerous if you are not supposed to have the right of way. But something that is equally as dangerous is not taking the right of way when you are supposed to have it. Such as at a 4-way stop. If you obviously stopped before any other car that is pulling up to that 4-way stop, always go first. It is the best to follow the rules no matter what. But more importantly, one thing I see all the time, which I do not understand, is cars that will be on a road that does not have a stop of any sort, and a car will come to a complete stop for someone who is at a stop sign so that they can go, instead of just using their right of way to go right past that stop sign and letting that car go after them, which makes far more sense. I get that you're trying to be courteous, and I respect that sort of politeness, but the issue is nobody is expecting you to do that. Everybody is expecting you to take the right of way. And in a lot of senses, it is more confusing and less expected when someone does not take their rightful right of way than when someone takes the right of way that they are not supposed to have. So put simply, if you're not completely aware of what all right of ways there is to follow, brush up your knowledge on the rules of the road and make sure that you are aware of all the examples where a right of way would be followed, such as with pedestrians in a crosswalk or something like that, or at a 4-way stop, or in any given situation, and always do your best, although driving defensively, to take the right of way when you are supposed to have it. It will make everything much easier to understand for the rest of the people on the road. The number 3 bad habit that can be incredibly serious is what I call the stopped or slow car reveal. This is mostly an issue on multi-lane highways, like a multi-lane divided highway or something like that, such as our interstate system here in the United States, or whatever sort of similar systems we have throughout the world. This could apply in a lot of different situations. But when you have multiple cars next to each other going the same direction, and say that you're driving in the left lane of 2 available lanes, and you have multiple people behind you, and you notice that a car shortly in front of you is either going much slower than you are or is at a complete stop. So you, in order to avoid that car, go over to the free lane to go around it. This is fine in theory. Obviously, you're avoiding an accident and you're not braking unnecessarily hard. But the issue that leaves is that with the distance that you left that car before you moved over into the other lane, obviously you saw it coming. Not everyone that is behind you in the lane that you left knows that there is a stopped car there. So what you're essentially doing, if you're coming up to this stopped car and you swerve over semi-last second, the car is right behind you, could very well ram right into the back of that car, essentially causing an accident. I'm sorry that I don't have like a better example or description for this, but although you are not directly responsible for that accident, had you either chosen to slow down instead of going to another lane, or simply paying more attention further ahead so things don't catch you off guard as easily, that accident may not have happened. So the moral of the story is, pay attention as far ahead as possible. This is something that they'll tell you in racing schools and stuff like that, on a track as well. It will minimize the amount of times that you are surprised and the potential accidents that could occur. And please be mindful of the cars behind you as well. The number 4 terrible habit that might show that you're not as good of a driver as you think is being overly cautious. In my opinion, something that makes up a good driver is being generally predictable. And most people on the road today are not expecting people to be overly cautious. And because of how many bad drivers there are and stupid drivers there are, a lot of us just expect people to drive stupid, and we have to drive defensively because we're concerned about that being a potential problem. People being severely overly cautious can cause the issue of being unexpected and essentially making a much bigger problem than they might even realize. Now, I completely understand why you would want to be overly cautious. Like I'd mentioned, there's a lot of stupid drivers that are absolutely ruining the road in a lot of ways. But you have to be predictable if you yourself do not want to cause an accident. So for example, if you're coming up to a light and it's red and you're turning right at this light and it goes green and you have a green arrow to turn right, I can understand why you might want to be cautious and still slow down and make sure that there is no one coming. But you do have to understand that when people behind you see a green arrow, they are expecting people in front of them to just go. Especially if none of you have come to a stop and you were already moving in the first place. And although it is on the drivers behind you to be paying as much attention as possible, and I absolutely respect being safe, especially with how many people run red lights, there's a way to do so without being overly cautious and potentially causing an accident because you are trying so hard not to cause an accident or be involved in an accident, whatever it may be. But I think a good motto sort of to live by when it comes to being overly cautious is that there's a lot of drivers out there that are offensive drivers, which is obviously not recommended. That means that the people that are actually trying to drive safely need to be defensive drivers. That does not mean you need to be a submissive driver. There is a way to be safe without being overly cautious and without being overly aggressive, and that sort of sweet spot is where we absolutely want to try and live. And turning this right back around, the number 5 terrible habit that might show that you are not as good of a driver as you think is being overly confident. And this can really apply in so many different ways and situations while driving. Obviously, we talked about taking the right of way when you're not supposed to have it and things like that. Being an overly aggressive driver, I don't think is the same thing as being an overly confident driver. But if you go into driving every single time with the viewpoint that you are a safe driver, you're a good driver, and you aren't going to let anything happen, well, that sort of attitude can very well be a detriment, not necessarily a benefit. I remember in a video from David Patterson a while ago, I don't remember which video it was off of the top of my head, but if I can figure it out, I will link it in the description. He mentioned that he does not like getting into a car with someone who says that they are a good driver. And that oftentimes the best drivers are the ones that have the attitude, hey man, I'm still learning every single day. And that's something that I could not agree with more wholeheartedly. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging skill that you have behind the wheel, but having the attitude that you are a good driver and therefore you are not the problem. You cannot do wrong and you do not have things to learn is absolutely the worst way to look at driving possible. And I understand that sometimes this viewpoint can kind of come out of nowhere and we might not even realize that we've developed it. To be honest, this is also something that I probably can work on myself. But ultimately, one thing we need to remember is just because we do what we should, we buckle our seatbelts, we make sure our passengers are buckling their seatbelts, we are driving generally safely, we're not taking the right of way when we're not supposed to have it, we aren't giving the right of way away when we should rightfully have it, we aren't going way too fast in every given situation, whatever it may be. Those are good driving habits, but we cannot let those things go to our head as if all of a sudden we are the king of the road. That sort of attitude can kind of come out of nowhere. And it's ironic that being humble enough to try and be a safe driver in all situations is what can ultimately lead to this attitude coming up out of nowhere. But ultimately, the best thing to remember is none of us are perfect. None of us don't have anything to learn when it comes to driving. Even amazing athletes of drivers, such as in Formula One or in WRC or in the 80s Group B Rally or IndyCar or whatever it may be, they still have things to learn. They might be amazing drivers that put us to shame in every single way, but they still have things to learn. How could we, as general drivers on the street, even if you have done some track driving or whatever it may be, how can we really have the attitude that we don't have anything to learn? The answer? Well, we shouldn't. So I hope that this video was enlightening or helpful in some way, and if any of you guys have noticed that these are habits that you're guilty of, well, in some ways, me too. Just make sure that you learn from these things and that you continue to always improve your driving skills, having the right attitude, and you will do better than a lot of people on the road, absolutely. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys stopping by the videos. Obviously, things have been different on the channel recently than how they were. There's been less videos than there was for a while. I did bring this up in different videos. It's something that I'm trying to fix, but a sign for the future, if I have pretty much any facial hair, especially to this level, which is not crazy, but I'm almost always clean shaven, it's probably because I'm stressed out. Just being totally real with you guys, had a lot of things going on and things have been stressful in certain ways, but we'll get through it. The channel will get through it. I absolutely am never going to let this channel get to the point where it was before last time that I was very stressed out, which was probably towards the end of 2021 when my channel went on a break for 8 months or something like that. But if you guys did enjoy this video and you'd like to see more from me, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It really helps out. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I think we can do it with you guys' help, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys watching, and I will see you guys all in the next one.